I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here telling a story like this. Most days, I'm still not sure if I should. My therapist says it's good to talk about it. My wife says the same thing. But how do you explain something that defies explanation? How do you put words to an experience that exists beyond them? I guess you just start at the beginning. My name is Michael Reeves, Staff Sergeant, United States Army, 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. I enlisted right after high school in 2002. The Twin Towers were still smoking in our national consciousness. And like a lot of young men at that time, I felt a calling, a duty, something bigger than myself pulling me towards service. Basic training, advanced individual training, Ranger School. I went through it all with a singular focus. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to serve alongside the best. I wanted to make a difference in a world that suddenly seemed a lot more dangerous than it had when I was growing up in small-town Minnesota. By 2005, I was on my second deployment to Iraq. We were based out of FOB Sykes near Tal Afar in northwestern Iraq. Hot as hell during the day, cold at night. Dust that got into everything. Your weapons, your food, your lungs. You'd wake up tasting it, go to sleep breathing it. Our unit had been conducting raids almost nightly, targeting high-value individuals, weapons caches, bomb-making facilities. The operational tempo was relentless. Sleep came in short bursts when you could get it. Most nights were spent planning, prepping gear, or out on mission. The guys in my squad, they were my brothers. That sounds cliche until you've lived it. There was Martinez, our squad joker, who could make us laugh even after 36 hours without sleep. Williams, quiet and methodical, the best marksman I'd ever seen. Thompson, our medic, who carried extra weight in medical supplies because he couldn't stand the thought of not being prepared. And Davis, my best friend since Ranger School, who had a 4-month-old daughter he'd only seen in photos and video calls. We'd been through hell together. Firefights, close calls, losing friends. The kind of experiences that either break you apart or bind you together permanently. For us, it was the latter. April 16th, 2005. I remember the date because it was my mother's birthday. I'd sent her a card a week earlier, hoping it would arrive on time. I remember thinking about her that morning, wondering if she'd gotten it, wondering what she might be doing to celebrate back home where things were normal, where the biggest threat might be burning the birthday cake, not stepping on an IED. We'd been tracking a high-level insurgent leader for weeks. Intelligence had pinpointed his location to a compound on the outskirts of a small village about 20 kilometers from our base. The mission brief was straightforward. Raid the compound, capture the target, gather intelligence materials, extract. We'd done dozens of operations just like it. The day before the mission, I called home. My wife, Sarah, answered on the second ring. "Hey, babe," I said, the satellite delay making our conversation feel disjointed. "Michael, I was hoping you'd call today." Her voice, even through the static and delay, was like a lifeline to another world. How are things? How's Ethan?" Our son was 3, a bundle of energy and curiosity I'd been missing desperately. "He's good. He made you a picture at daycare. He says it's you and him fishing." I swallowed hard. "Tell him I can't wait to see it. Tell him Daddy's going to take him fishing for real when I get home." "I will." "When do you think that might be?" "I don't know exactly. Few more months, probably." I didn't tell her about the mission coming up. I never did. What was the point of making her worry? "Well, we miss you. Ethan asks about you every day." "I miss you guys too. More than I can say." We talked for 15 more minutes about ordinary things. The leak under the kitchen sink, the neighbor's new dog, her mother coming to visit next month, normal life continuing half a world away. Before we hung up, Sarah said something that would come back to me later in a way neither of us could have imagined. "Michael, I had this strange dream last night. You were standing in this beautiful garden, and you looked so peaceful. More peaceful than I've ever seen you. You were smiling at me, but you couldn't hear me calling to you." "Sounds nice," I said, not paying it much attention. "Better than the dreams I've been having. Just be careful, okay? Come back to us. Always. I love you." "I love you too." I hung up and went to check my gear again. Plate carrier with ceramic inserts. Extra magazines. Night vision. Comm check. The rituals of preparation that became second nature. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my cot staring at the plywood ceiling, listening to the generators humming outside, the occasional distant thump of artillery. I thought about home, about Ethan growing up so fast, changing in ways I was missing, about Sarah handling everything alone, about my mom's birthday. I must have drifted off eventually because the next thing I knew, Davis was shaking me awake. Time to roll, brother. The pre-mission briefing was at 2100 hours. The intelligence officer went over the details again. Compound layout, number of expected combatants, location of the target, exfil routes. Our captain emphasized that we wanted the target alive if possible. He was believed to have valuable intelligence on cell networks and planned attacks. Any questions? The captain asked. There were none. We'd been through this drill countless times. All right, wheels up at 2300. Good hunting. We geared up in silence, each man focused on his own preparation, but aware of everyone else around him. That's how it was, individual focus within a collective consciousness. We checked each other's equipment, made sure nothing was loose, nothing would make noise. A final comm check, and we moved to the helicopters. 2 Blackhawks would take us in, dropping us about a kilometer from the objective. From there, we'd move in on foot. The night was clear, a half moon providing just enough natural light. The helicopters lifted off, the familiar sensation of my stomach dropping as we climbed into the night sky. Looking out at the darkness below, dotted with occasional lights from villages and vehicles, I felt that strange calm that often came before missions. Not the absence of fear, but its transformation into heightened awareness. Every sense sharpened. Time seemed to slow down and speed up simultaneously. Davis sat across from me, his face half illuminated by the red interior lights of the helicopter. He caught my eye and gave me a nod. No words necessary. The crew chief signaled 5 minutes to drop. We checked weapons one last time. The helicopter began to descend, and I could feel the shift in my body as we dropped toward the landing zone. The skids touched down with a slight bump, and we were moving, pouring out of both sides of the Black Hawk into the cool night air. We took a knee in a defensive perimeter, scanning our sectors until the helicopters pulled away. The sound of the rotors faded, replaced by the profound silence of the Iraqi countryside at night. A silence so complete it seemed to have weight and substance. Our team leader signaled, and we began moving toward the objective in a staggered column. Night vision gave the world an eerie green glow. Through it, I could see the outline of the village ahead, the compound just beyond it. We moved quietly, each step placed with deliberate care. Communication was hand signals only. The village was quiet as we moved through it. Dogs barked in the distance, but none close enough to give us away. Most of the houses were dark. In one, I could see the blue flicker of a television through a window. Normal life, even here. We reached the edge of the village and paused to observe the compound. It was larger than most in the area. A main building with 2 smaller structures, all surrounded by a wall about 8 feet high. One entry point visible from our position. A metal gate on the eastern side. Intelligence had indicated minimal security, but we could see 2 armed men patrolling inside the walls. Our sniper team had set up on a ridgeline overlooking the compound and confirmed what we were seeing. Overwatch in position, came the quiet voice in my earpiece. 2 tangos visible inside the perimeter. No movement in the main building. Our team leader made the call. Execute as planned. Alpha team on the main gate. Bravo over the west wall. Charlie, maintain perimeter security. I was with Bravo team. We moved to the western side of the compound, using the shadows for cover. When we reached the wall, Williams and I formed a stirrup with our hands, boosting Martinez up first. He secured the top, then helped pull the rest of us up. We dropped silently into what appeared to be a small garden area. Tomato plants and herbs grew in neat rows. Something about that struck me. This place of violence and war, and someone was carefully tending tomatoes. The incongruity of it almost made me laugh. That peculiar reaction to stress that sometimes bubbles up at the strangest moments. We stacked on the door to the main building, just as we heard the first pop of suppressed gunfire from the front gate. Alpha team had engaged the guards. Our window of surprise was narrowing. Davis was on point. He tried the door, unlocked. He pushed it open slowly and we moved in, each clearing our sectors as we'd done hundreds of times in training and dozens of times for real. The first room was empty, a simple sitting area with cushions on the floor, a small TV in the corner. We continued through the house room by room. Kitchen, bathroom, 2 bedrooms, both empty. Bravo team, main building appears clear, I reported quietly. Roger that. Alpha team has secured the front entrance. 2 enemy KIA. Moving to your position. We regrouped in the main sitting area, a sense of unease growing. The intelligence had been specific. The target was supposed to be here. Check for hidden rooms, tunnels, anything, our team leader ordered. We spread out, tapping on walls, looking under rugs, checking for seams or breaks in the flooring. In the back bedroom, Davis called out, I think I got something. We converged on his position. He'd moved a heavy wooden chest, revealing a trap door in the floor. Definitely not on the blueprints, he said. Our team leader made the call. Let's check it out. Davis, Reeves, Martinez, Williams, you're going down. Thompson with me on security up here. Davis lifted the trap door, revealing a set of crude wooden stairs descending into darkness. We switched our night vision back on and began to descend. Weapons at the ready. The stairs led to a tunnel roughly 4 feet high, forcing us to crouch as we moved forward. The air was thick and stale, the dirt walls reinforced with wooden supports every few feet. We'd moved perhaps 20 meters when the tunnel opened into a larger underground room. Our night vision revealed stacks of ammunition crates, weapons, and communications equipment along the walls. And there in the far corner, 3 men huddled in conversation. They hadn't heard us approach. One of them matched the photos of our target. Davis signaled the identification, and we prepared to move in. The plan was to take them by surprise, subdue them quickly with minimal force if they didn't resist. I never saw who fired first. One moment we were poised to move, and the next the room erupted in gunfire. Muzzle flashes lit up the space like a strobe light, the sound deafening in the confined area. I felt the impact before I heard the shot, a hammer blow to my chest that knocked me backward. My training kicked in. I returned fire, squeezing off controlled pairs toward the muzzle flashes even as I tried to find cover behind a stack of crates. I could hear Davis shouting into his radio, calling for backup. Martinez was laying down suppressive fire to my left. I reached down to check my vest where I'd been hit. My hand came away wet. The round had found a gap in my plates, just under my right arm. I remember thinking, with strange detachment, that's going to be a problem. The firefight lasted maybe 30 seconds, though it felt both instantaneous and eternal. When it ended, all 3 insurgents were down. Williams was hit in the leg but still mobile, and I was finding it increasingly difficult to breathe. Davis was at my side immediately. Mike, where are you hit? Right side. I managed, the words coming out wet and thick. Think it might have caught a lung. He called for Thompson as he helped me lean against the wall. I could hear the urgency in his voice, but it seemed to be coming from far away now. Stay with me, brother. Thompson's coming. We're going to get you out of here. I tried to nod, but the movement sent waves of pain through my chest. I could taste blood in my mouth, feel it bubbling with each labored breath. Not good. I'd seen enough combat injuries to know what a sucking chest wound meant. Thompson arrived and immediately went to work, cutting away my gear to access the wound. I heard him curse under his breath. How bad? I asked, though I already knew. He didn't answer directly, just said, we need to get you out of here now. They were calling for immediate evacuation, for the helicopters to come back. Davis was on the radio, his voice tight with controlled panic. We need immediate CASEVAC. 1 urgent surgical. The room was starting to spin, faces and voices blurring together. I was going into shock. I knew this from my training, could recognize the symptoms even as they overwhelmed me. My extremities were going cold, my thoughts becoming disjointed. I thought of Sarah and Ethan, of my mother's birthday, of the fishing trip I'd promised my son. Tell Sarah, I started to say to Davis, but he cut me off. Tell her yourself when we get home. You're not checking out on me, Mike. Not today. They improvised a stretcher from a tarp found in the room. The pain when they lifted me was blinding, white-hot lightning through my chest. I must have screamed, though I don't remember doing so. The journey back through the tunnel was a blur of agony. Each step they took sent fresh waves of pain through me. By the time we reached the main house, I was drifting in and out of consciousness. Outside, I remember looking up at the stars. So clear here, away from city lights. So many of them. I focused on them, trying to stay conscious, trying to breathe through the pain. The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder. I could feel the downdraft, see the dust swirling around us as it approached. The PJs were there almost immediately, taking over from Thompson, starting IVs, checking my vitals. Pulse is thready. BP's dropping. We need to move now. They loaded me onto the helicopter. Davis climbed in beside me, refusing to leave. The last thing I remember clearly is his face, tight with worry, mouth moving with words I couldn't hear over the rotor noise. He was holding my hand, squeezing it hard, as if he could anchor me to this world through sheer force of will. Then darkness began to close in from the edges of my vision. The pain which had been my constant companion began to recede. In its place came a strange floating sensation. I was aware of the helicopter lifting off, of the frantic activity around me, but it all seemed increasingly distant, like I was watching it happen to someone else. My last coherent thought was of Sarah's dream, me standing in a garden, peaceful, unable to hear her calling. As consciousness slipped away, I wondered if that was where I was heading now. And then there was nothing. until there wasn't. I don't know how to describe what happened next. The words we have, they're inadequate. They were made for describing this world, not whatever I experienced. But I'll try. The first thing I became aware of was the absence of pain. After the white-hot agony that had been consuming me, its sudden disappearance was shocking. I felt light, unburdened, as if gravity had lost its hold on me. I was still in the helicopter. At least that's what I thought at first. I could see the medics working frantically over a body, my body. Davis was still there, his face a mask of fear and determination. One of the PJs was doing chest compressions. Another was hanging a fresh EV bag. "He's in V-fib. Get the paddles." I watched with detached curiosity as they pressed the defibrillator paddles to my chest. My body arched with the shock, then fell back. No response. Again! Another shock. Nothing. I should have been terrified, watching my own death unfolding before me. But fear seemed to belong to the world I was leaving behind. Instead, I felt a profound sense of calm, of rightness. I became aware that I wasn't alone. Standing or floating beside me was Martinez. Not the living Martinez who was back at the compound, but Martinez as I'd last seen him, in his full gear, weapon in hand. Except it wasn't really Martinez. It looked like him, had his features, his build, but there was something fundamentally different. Something in the eyes that told me this wasn't my squad mate, but something else using his appearance. "It's time to go, Mike," he said, his voice both familiar and utterly strange. "Go where?" I asked, surprised I could speak. He smiled, and in that smile was a warmth and wisdom that Martinez, the real Martinez, had never possessed. "Sunked, you'll see." I looked back at my body one last time. They were still working on me, but with decreasing urgency. Davis had his head bowed now, his shoulders shaking slightly. I felt a pang of regret, of sadness for his pain, for all the pain my death would cause to those I loved. "Can I stay?" I asked. "My wife, my son, they need me." The being that looked like Martinez shook his head. "That's not for me to decide. I'm just here to guide you." As he spoke, I became aware of a thinning is the only way I can describe it. The scene in the helicopter, my body, the medics, Davis, all of it was becoming less substantial. Like a fog was rising, obscuring the details. And beyond that fog, I could sense something else. A presence. Many presences. A light that wasn't light as we understand it, but something more fundamental. Martinez, or whatever was wearing his form, held out his hand. "It's easier if you don't resist." I hesitated only briefly before taking it. As soon as our hands touched, the helicopter scene vanished completely. We were elsewhere. I say elsewhere, because there's no adequate way to describe it. It wasn't a place in any sense we understand. There were no walls, no floor, no ceiling, no up or down. Just being, existence without form. And yet, paradoxically, it felt more real than anything I'd ever experienced. As if everything before had been a shadow, a pale imitation of true reality. The being that had appeared as Martinez was changing now, its form becoming less defined, more fluid. I sensed rather than saw others approaching, presences that radiated a kind of loving awareness that was overwhelming in its intensity. They surrounded me, these beings of light and consciousness. I felt them examining me, not with eyes, but with something more penetrating. They were looking into me, seeing everything I was, everything I had been, every thought, every action, every choice I'd ever made. There was no judgment in their examination, only a bottomless compassion and understanding that brought me to my knees, or would have, if I'd still had knees. I felt naked, exposed, yet completely accepted. And then they began to communicate with me, not in words, but in pure thought, pure feeling. They showed me my life, not as a linear progression of events, but as a totality. I saw the connections between moments I'd thought unrelated, the ripple effects of actions I'd considered insignificant, the unseen impact of words spoken in anger or kindness. I saw myself through the eyes of others, my parents, my wife, my son, my friends, even strangers I'd encountered briefly. I felt their feelings, understood their perspectives. I experienced the joy I'd brought to some, the pain I'd caused others. It was humbling, illuminating, devastating, and elevating in equal measure. "Why am I here?" I asked, though not with words. The response came as a wave of understanding. I was here because my physical form could no longer sustain my consciousness. But whether this was a temporary visit or a permanent transition was still undetermined. Undetermined by whom? I wondered. The answer was complex, partly by the medical intervention happening in what I now thought of as the other reality. partly by my own will and readiness, and partly by something else, something greater that I couldn't fully comprehend. Time didn't exist here as I understood it. What might have been moments or millennia I was shown, everything, the interconnectedness of all consciousness, the underlying patterns of reality, the structure of what we might call the universe, though that word is hopelessly inadequate. I understood in those timeless moments that death as we fear it doesn't exist, that consciousness continues, that we are more, infinitely more, than our physical forms. And then abruptly the communication changed tone. I sensed expectation, anticipation. Something was about to happen. A decision point was approaching. The being that had first appeared as Martinez was beside me again, though no longer in human form. Now it was simply presence, intention, focused awareness. You have a choice. It conveyed. You can stay and continue your journey here. Or you can return. Return? I asked, confused. To my body? Is that possible? The response was affirmative, but with caveats. Return would mean pain, healing, challenges, the full human experience again, with all its limitations and suffering. And my time would still be finite. This would be a delay, not an escape from eventual physical death. What should I choose? I asked. The being conveyed something like amusement mixed with compassion. That's not for me to say. The choice must be yours. I considered. This place, this state, was peace beyond anything I'd known. Understanding beyond words. Connection beyond imagining. The thought of leaving it for the limited, painful existence of physical life was almost unthinkable. And yet, I thought of Sarah, of Ethan, of promises made and not yet fulfilled, of the life we were building together, of fishing trips not taken, birthdays not celebrated, a future not yet experienced. If I go back, I asked, will I remember this? The answer was unclear. Some do, some don't. Some remember immediately, some only in fragments, some only years later. The brain is a filter, and experiences beyond its normal parameters can be difficult for it to process and retain. As I wavered, uncertain, the scene changed again. I was shown two potential futures. In one, my body died in that helicopter. I saw Sarah receiving the news, collapsing into her mother's arms. Ethan growing up with only photos and stories of his father. My parents aging with the grief of outliving their child. In the other future, I returned. The path was hard, recovery, rehabilitation, nightmares, PTSD, but also joy. Watching Ethan grow. More children. A life built day by day with Sarah. Opportunities to share love, to help others, to make a difference in ways large and small. Neither path is wrong. The being communicated. Neither is right. They are simply different experiences for your consciousness to explore. I made my choice. The moment I decided, everything changed again. The vast, limitless space began to contract. The presences that had surrounded me started to recede. I felt myself being drawn back, pulled towards something dense and heavy and painful. The being that had guided me conveyed one last message. Not in words, but in pure understanding. A message about purpose, about why we experience the physical realm at all, about the growth that can only come through limitation and challenge. And underneath it all, a profound truth. That love is the fundamental force connecting all consciousness, all reality. Then the contraction accelerated. The light and peace and understanding began to fade. In their place came sensation. Painful, overwhelming sensation. Weight. Pressure. The feeling of lungs struggling to expand. The pounding of a heart. The rush of blood. I heard voices, distant at first, then growing clearer. We've got rhythm. He's back. BP's coming up. 60 over 40 and rising. Mike, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me. I felt someone holding my hand. With immense effort, I managed to exert the slightest pressure on their fingers. He squeezed. He's responding. The voice was Davis's, thick with emotion, cracking with relief. I tried to open my eyes, but the lids felt impossibly heavy. Everything hurt. The absence of pain I'd experienced was replaced by its overwhelming presence. But underneath the pain was something else. A certainty. A knowing that transcended the physical agony. I had died. I had gone somewhere beyond death, and I had been sent back with a message. A message I couldn't quite remember in that moment, as consciousness slipped away again, this time into the ordinary darkness of unconsciousness rather than the luminous realms beyond. But the knowing remained. And with it, a purpose I didn't yet understand, but would spend the rest of my life trying to fulfill. I woke up 3 days later in a military hospital in Germany. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed impossibly harsh after the gentle luminescence of what? The memory was already fading. slipping away like water through my fingers. He's awake, a nurse's voice. Then movement, people surrounding my bed. Everything hurt. Breathing was an exercise in controlled agony. A tube in my throat, machines beeping, 4 lines snaking from both arms. A doctor leaned over me, shining a penlight in my eyes. Staff Sergeant Reeves, can you hear me? Blink if you can hear me. I blinked, the simple movement requiring immense concentration. Good. You're at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. You've been in surgery. You're stable now, but I need you to stay calm. We'll remove the breathing tube soon. Surgery. I vaguely remembered being shot. The underground room. The firefight. Then the helicopter and something else. Something important that hovered just beyond recall. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical procedures, vital sign checks, and brief moments of consciousness between doses of pain medication. They removed the breathing tube, leaving my throat raw and voice a raspy whisper. When I was more alert, a different doctor came in. More senior, judging by the way the others deferred to him. Staff Sergeant Reeves, I'm Colonel Matthews. I performed your surgery. He checked my chart before continuing. You were hit with a 7.62 millimeter round that entered under your right arm between the ceramic plates of your vest. The bullet fragmented, causing extensive damage to your right lung and nicking your pulmonary artery. He paused, making sure I was following. You lost a significant amount of blood, and your heart stopped for approximately 4 minutes during transport. We had to perform emergency thoracic surgery to repair the damage. We've removed the bullet fragments and repaired the vessel and lung tissue, but you've got a long recovery ahead. 4 minutes. My heart had stopped for 4 minutes. Those 4 minutes stretched in my memory like an eternity. Something had happened during those 4 minutes. Something profound. The ... The others? My voice barely audible. Your team is fine. Williams sustained a through and through to his left thigh, but he's already been stabilized and sent stateside. Everyone else is uninjured. Relief washed through me. Then another thought, more urgent. My wife, my son, they've been notified of your condition. We'll arrange a call once you're a bit stronger. I nodded, the movement sending pain shooting through my chest. The doctor continued explaining my injuries, the procedures they'd performed, the recovery process ahead. I tried to focus, but my mind kept returning to those missing 4 minutes. There was something there, something important I needed to remember. As the doctor was leaving, I gathered my strength to ask one more question. When my heart stopped, did anything happen? The doctor paused, looking at me with sudden interest. What do you mean? Did I say anything? Do anything unusual? He studied me for a moment before responding. You were unconscious the entire time, Staff Sergeant. But when they got your heart started again, the medic reported that you seemed to be trying to communicate something. You were grasping at the air, like you were reaching for something. And your vitals stabilized much more quickly than expected, given the severity of your injuries. He hesitated, then added, some of the medical staff thought it was unusual. Your recovery so far has been remarkable considering what happened to you. That night, alone in my hospital room with only the beeping monitors for company, fragments began to return. Not complete memories, but impressions, sensations, a profound peace, a sense of being seen and known completely. And love, an overwhelming, all-encompassing love, unlike anything I'd experienced on Earth. I tried to piece these fragments together, to make sense of them, but exhaustion pulled me back into sleep. The next day I was allowed to call Sarah. When her face appeared on the video screen, tears were already streaming down her cheeks. Michael, she whispered, her voice breaking on my name. Hey, baby. I managed, trying to smile despite the pain. Don't cry. I'm okay. They said you died, Michael. You died and they brought you back. I nodded slowly. Yeah, that's what they tell me. I knew something was wrong. I felt it. She wiped at her tears. It was right around the time of my dream. The one I told you about. The garden. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. The garden. Sarah's dream of me in a peaceful garden, unable to hear her calling. Sarah, that dream. I started but was interrupted by a small face pushing into the frame. Daddy? Ethan's excited voice, his little face filling the screen. Daddy, when are you coming home? Mommy said you got an OE. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Yeah, buddy, I got an OE. But the doctors are fixing me up. I'll be home as soon as I can. And then we can go fishing? You promised. Yes, then we can go fishing. I promised, didn't I? We talked for a few more minutes before fatigue overtook me. Sarah could see it in my face. We should let you rest. We love you so much, Michael. I love you too. Both of you. After the call ended, I lay back, staring at the ceiling. Sarah's dream, the timing of it, the parallel to what I'd experienced, or what I thought I'd experienced. Was it just coincidence? A product of my trauma-addled brain creating connections that weren't really there? Or was it something more? The next week passed in a blur of pain management, medical procedures, and gradual improvements. I was moved from intensive care to a recovery ward. Physical therapy began, excruciating at first, just sitting up in bed or walking a few steps to a chair. Each night, more fragments of my experience returned in dreams. Vivid, intense dreams that left me gasping awake, reaching for something I couldn't quite grasp. The medical staff noted it in my chart, increased the dosage of my sleep medication. It helped with the nightmares of the firefight, but did nothing for these other dreams. These memories that weren't quite memories. A week after I woke up, Davis came to visit. He'd accompanied Williams back to Germany and had been trying to see me since I regained consciousness. They finally allowed it once I was moved to the regular ward. He stood awkwardly at the foot of my bed, looking relieved and uncomfortable at the same time. "You look like shit," he said finally, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. "Should see the other guy," I rasped back. The joke broke the tension. He pulled up a chair beside my bed. "Thought we lost you, man. When your heart stopped in that chopper," he shook his head, unable to continue. "I heard you were with me the whole time." "Damn right I was. Wasn't about to let you check out on my watch." I studied my friend's face, seeing the strain of the past days etched there. "They tell me it was close." "Close?" Davis let out a humorless laugh. "Mike, you were gone. 4 minutes of flatline. The PJs were about to call it when your heart suddenly started again. No warning, no response to the meds they were pushing. It just started, like someone flipped a switch." He leaned forward, lowering his voice though we were alone in the room. "And then you started reaching out, grabbing at the air. Your eyes were still closed, but you were, I don't know, man. It was like you were trying to hold on to something. Or someone." A chill ran down my spine. "Davis, when my heart stopped, I think something happened." What do you mean?" I hesitated. Davis and I had been through hell together, trusted each other with our lives. But this was different. Would he think I'd lost my mind? That the trauma and blood loss had caused hallucinations? But I needed to tell someone. Fragments of memory were consuming me, and Davis had been there. He'd seen something unusual happen. "I think I went somewhere," I said finally, when my heart stopped. It wasn't like being unconscious. It was. I struggled to find the words. It was more real than this, than being alive. Davis didn't laugh or look skeptical. Instead, he leaned closer, his expression serious. "What do you remember?" So I told him. The pieces I could recall. Watching the medical team work on my body. The being that appeared as Martinez. The journey to somewhere beyond physical reality. The overwhelming love and understanding. The choice to return. Davis listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You think I'm crazy?" I said finally. He shook his head slowly. No, I don't think you're crazy. But you don't believe me." "I didn't say that." He rubbed his face, choosing his words carefully. "Look, I don't know what to believe. But I know what I saw in that helicopter. And I know you, Mike. You're not the type to make shit up or imagine things." He stood up, pacing the small room. "My grandmother used to talk about things like this. She was Navajo, very traditional. She believed the spirit could leave the body, travel to other realms. Most of the family thought she was just superstitious, but," he shrugged, "maybe the old ways knew something we've forgotten." Relief washed through me. Davis didn't think I was crazy. He might not fully believe my experience, but he wasn't dismissing it either. "There's something else," I said. "I think I was sent back with a message. Something important I'm supposed to remember, supposed to do. But I can't. It's like trying to hold smoke." Davis sat back down. "Give it time, brother. Your body's still healing. Maybe the rest will come when you're ready." After Davis left, I lay back, exhausted but somehow lighter. Sharing even the fragments I could remember had helped make them more real, more substantial. And Davis's acceptance, his willingness to consider the possibility that what I'd experienced was real, gave me permission to do the same. That night, I dreamed again. But this time, it wasn't fragments. It was whole, complete, vivid. I was back in that place beyond places, surrounded by beings of light and consciousness. They were showing me something, the interconnectedness of all life, all consciousness. How what we perceive as separation is an illusion. How love is the fundamental force binding everything together. And then they showed me something else. The suffering in our world. The pain caused by the illusion of separateness. The violence, the hatred, the fear, all stemming from our failure to recognize our essential oneness. This is why you must return. They communicated not in words but in pure understanding. To bear witness. To speak truth. To remind others of what they have forgotten. But how? I asked. Who will listen to me? Those who are ready will hear. Begin with what you know. Begin with your own life. The dream, the memory was so vivid, so real, that when I woke, I half expected to find myself still in that realm of light and understanding. Instead, I was in my hospital bed, early morning sunlight filtering through the blinds. But something had changed. The message was clear now. I remembered what I was supposed to do. 2 weeks later, I was stable enough to be transported back to the States. I arrived at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center to continue my recovery and rehabilitation. Sarah and Ethan were waiting for me when I arrived. Seeing them was like experiencing gravity after floating in space, a sudden, powerful pull back to Earth, to physical reality. Ethan ran to my wheelchair only to be gently restrained by Sarah, who reminded him that Daddy has an OE and we need to be gentle. It's okay, I said, opening my arms. Come here, buddy. He approached more carefully then, climbing onto my lap with Sarah's help. The weight of him, the solid reality of my son in my arms brought tears to my eyes. I buried my face in his hair, breathing in the scent of him. Sarah knelt beside the wheelchair, her hand on my arm, her eyes searching my face. You look different, she said softly. Different how? She shook her head, unable to articulate it. Just different. Something in your eyes. Later, when Ethan was occupied with a coloring book a nurse had given him, Sarah and I had a moment alone. They told me how close it was. She said, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. That your heart stopped. I nodded. Sarah, remember the dream you told me about? The one where I was in a garden and couldn't hear you calling? Her eyes widened. Yes. It was the night before it happened. I was there, Sarah. When my heart stopped, I was somewhere else. And it was peaceful, just like in your dream. She stared at me, her expression a mix of wonder and confusion. What are you saying? I'm saying I had what they call a near-death experience. I left my body. I went somewhere. And I think somehow you sensed it, saw it in your dream. I expected skepticism, maybe even concern for my mental state. Instead, tears filled her eyes. I knew it, she whispered. I felt it, Michael. I felt you leaving, and I called to you, but you couldn't hear me. A chill ran through me at her words. The parallel was too exact to be coincidence. Somehow, across thousands of miles, Sarah had connected with my experience as it was happening. There's more, I said. So much more that I need to tell you. But not here, not now. She nodded, understanding. When you're stronger. When we're home. The next month at Walter Reed was grueling. Physical therapy twice daily. Pain that medication couldn't entirely mask. Psychological evaluations, tests, procedures. The military medical system working to rebuild my body, to make me functional again, if not whole. Through it all, the memory of my experience remained vivid. At night, more details would return in dreams. The beings who had guided me, the knowledge they had shared, the purpose they had given me. I began keeping a journal, recording everything I could remember. At first, it was just for myself, a way to capture the experience before it faded. But as the pages filled, I realized it was more than that. It was the beginning of fulfilling my purpose, bearing witness, speaking truth. The psychologists who evaluated me noted my spiritual interpretations of trauma in their reports. One suggested that what I'd experienced was simply the brain's response to oxygen deprivation and trauma, a common hallucination reported by those who've had close brushes with death. I didn't argue. What would be the point? I knew what I'd experienced was real, more real than the hospital room where we sat discussing it, but I also knew that understanding would come only to those ready to receive it. The beings had told me as much. Those who are ready will hear, they had said. I was learning that this was true. My roommate at Walter Reed was a Marine who'd lost both legs to an IED in Afghanistan. Carson was young, just 23, and struggling with both his physical injuries and the psychological trauma of what he'd experienced. One night, he woke screaming from a nightmare. I was still awake, writing in my journal. After the nurses came and went, after his breathing steadied, he spoke into the darkness. Do you ever wonder what it's all for? He asked, All this pain, all this loss? I used to, I replied, but not anymore. I put down my pen, considering how to respond. Carson wasn't religious in any conventional sense. He'd made that clear in previous conversations. But there was something in his question, a genuine seeking, a soul in pain looking for meaning. Something happened to me when I was injured. I said carefully, something that changed how I see everything. In the dim light, I could see him turn toward me, his interest piqued. What do you mean? So I told him. Not everything. I was still learning what parts of my experience could be communicated effectively and what parts defied language. But I told him about leaving my body, about the beings of light, about the overwhelming love I'd experienced. When I finished, there was a long silence. I expected skepticism or dismissal. Instead, Carson's voice came softly through the darkness. My grandmother died when I was deployed. I couldn't come home for the funeral. He paused. The night she died, I had this dream. She was sitting with me, telling me she was okay, that she was going somewhere beautiful. I could feel her hand on mine, real as anything. He shifted in his bed, the medical equipment creaking with his movement. I never told anyone about that dream. Thought they'd think I was being sentimental or something. But when you describe that love you felt, that's what it was like with her. Like she was wrapped in this love I couldn't even comprehend. I believe you, I said. I believe she really came to you. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, I think she did. We talked for hours that night. About life and death. About meaning and purpose. About the possibility that consciousness extends beyond the physical body. It was the first time I'd spoken openly about my experience with someone other than Sarah and Davis. And in sharing it, I found that the message became clearer, stronger. Carson began healing differently after that night. Not just physically, but emotionally. He found a purpose in his recovery, a meaning in his suffering that had been absent before. And I realized that this was part of what I was meant to do, to share my experience with those who were ready to hear it, who needed to hear it. As my physical recovery progressed, more opportunities to share arose. A nurse who'd lost her son and wondered if he was at peace. A doctor struggling with burnout who had forgotten why he'd entered medicine in the first place. A fellow soldier questioning his faith after the horrors he'd witnessed. I didn't preach or proselytize. I simply shared my experience when the moment seemed right, when someone showed an openness to hearing it. And in almost every case, something shifted in them, a burden lightened, a question answered, a perspective widened. 3 months after arriving at Walter Reed, I was discharged with a Purple Heart, a medical retirement from the Army, and a body that would never quite be what it once was. The doctors called my recovery remarkable, especially given the severity of my injuries. I knew there was more to it than medical science could explain. Sarah, Ethan, and I returned to Minnesota, to the small town where I'd grown up. My parents had helped Sarah find a house while I was recovering. A modest 3-bedroom with a big backyard and a small pond within walking distance. Perfect for teaching Ethan to fish, as I'd promised. Coming home was both easier and harder than I'd expected. Easier because being with my family, away from the medical facilities and the constant reminders of trauma, allowed something in me to finally relax. Harder because civilian life required adjustments, a new identity, a new purpose. Or perhaps not so new. The message I'd brought back remained clear. Bear witness, speak truth, remind others of what they had forgotten. The challenge was figuring out how to do that in the context of my new life. Sarah had been my rock through the recovery process. She listened without judgment when I spoke of my experience, asked thoughtful questions, shared her own insights. She didn't accept everything without question. That wasn't her nature, but she approached it with an open mind and heart. One evening, about a month after we'd settled into our new home, we sat on the back porch watching Ethan play in the yard. The summer air was heavy with the scent of freshly cut grass and the promise of rain. I've been thinking, Sarah said, breaking a comfortable silence, about what happened to you, about the message you brought back. I turned to look at her, struck as always by the quiet strength in her face. What about it? You said you were sent back to bear witness, to remind people of what they've forgotten, that those who are ready will hear. I nodded. I think you need to find a way to reach more people, she continued. The conversations you've had, the lives you've touched already, that's wonderful. But I think there's more you're meant to do. I've been thinking the same thing, I admitted. But I'm not sure how. I'm not a preacher or a writer or a public speaker. Sarah smiled. Maybe you need to become one. Or maybe there's another way. But Michael, what happened to you? It's too important to keep to yourself or share only when the perfect moment arises. She was right, of course. The question was how to proceed. The answer came from an unexpected source. My mother had been part of a grief support group since my father died 5 years earlier. She mentioned that the group leader was looking for speakers, people who could share experiences that might offer hope or perspective to those grieving. "I thought of you," she said during one of her visits. "What you've been through, what you've seen, it might help some of these people who are struggling to find meaning after losing someone." The idea terrified me. Speaking to a group? Sharing my most profound personal experience with strangers? Yet even as fear rose in me, I knew this was the right next step. The grief support group met in a church basement, though it wasn't affiliated with any particular religion. About 20 people of various ages sat in a circle of folding chairs, their faces bearing the universal marks of loss, some fresh and raw, others tempered by time but still visible. The group leader, a gentle-voiced woman named Eleanor, introduced me simply as someone with a unique perspective on what might lie beyond death. I had rehearsed what I would say, trying to find words for the ineffable, ways to describe experiences that existed beyond language. But when I stood before these people, these souls in pain, all my prepared remarks fell away. "My name is Michael Reeves," I began. "4 months ago, I died in a helicopter over Iraq." For the next hour, I shared my experience. Not the sanitized version I'd given to military psychologists, but the raw, real truth of it. The journey out of my body, the beings of light, the overwhelming love and acceptance, the choice to return, the message I'd been given. When I finished, the room was silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of disbelief or judgment, but the deep, resonant silence of recognition, of truth being absorbed. Then an elderly man in the back raised his hand. "My wife," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Before she died, she started seeing her parents. They'd been gone for decades, but she said they were in the room with her, telling her it was almost time to go, that she shouldn't be afraid." He wiped at his eyes. "The doctors said it was the medication or her brain shutting down. But she was so lucid, so certain. She was telling the truth," I said gently. "They really were there." He nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I believe you. I believe her." "Thank you." Others began to share then. A woman whose son had died in a car accident and appeared to her in dreams, telling her he was at peace. A man whose near drowning had given him a glimpse of somewhere beautiful. A nurse who had witnessed too many deathbed visions to dismiss them as mere hallucinations. I realized that night that I wasn't alone, that countless others had glimpsed the reality beyond our physical existence, that the message I'd been given to share was one that many had received in fragments, through their own experiences or those of loved ones. What was missing was not the experiences themselves, but a framework to understand them, to integrate them, to allow them to transform fear into hope, separation into connection. That first grief support group led to invitations to speak at others. Those led to community gatherings, church groups, hospice volunteer trainings. I didn't seek publicity or attention, but word spread organically, person to person, group to group. I developed a simple format for these talks. I would share my experience, then open the floor for others to share theirs. Invariably, people would come forward with stories they'd kept hidden, experiences they'd never felt safe revealing before. A pattern emerged. Those who had their own experiences of the beyond felt validated, often expressing profound relief at being able to speak openly about what had happened to them. Those who hadn't had such experiences but had lost loved ones found comfort in the possibility, even the probability, that death was not the end. And almost everyone left with a shifted perspective on what matters most in life. The message the beings had given me about the illusion of separateness, about love as the fundamental truth of existence, resonated deeply with people from all walks of life, all belief systems. Sarah supported me through all of it, managing the increasing requests for me to speak, helping me navigate the emotional intensity of the work. Ethan, now 4, understood only that Daddy talked to people about the time he went to heaven, but even his limited comprehension reminded me to keep my message simple, accessible. About a year after I began speaking publicly, I received an email from a researcher at the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies. Dr. Elizabeth Chen had heard about my experience from a colleague who'd attended one of my talks. "We study phenomena like near-death experiences using scientific methodology to investigate the nature of consciousness," she wrote. "Your account contains several elements of particular interest to our research. Would you be willing to be interviewed as part of our ongoing study?" I agreed, curious about how science was approaching these experiences. Dr. Chen flew to Minnesota the following month, spending 2 days interviewing me, recording every detail I could recall about my NDE. She was particularly interested in the veridical aspects, the things I had perceived while outside my body that could potentially be verified. What's fascinating, she told me after our sessions, is the consistency across thousands of these accounts. People from different cultures, different belief systems, different eras, they report so many of the same elements you've described. The overwhelming love, the beings of light, the life review, the choice to return. Does that suggest to you that these experiences are real? I asked. Not just hallucinations or the brain's response to trauma? She smiled. Science requires us to be cautious in our conclusions. But I can tell you that the evidence is compelling that consciousness may not be entirely produced by the brain, that it may, in fact, continue when the brain is not functioning. Her scientific language was careful, measured, but I could see in her eyes the same recognition I'd seen in so many others. Someone who knew, beyond data and studies, that there was more to our existence than the physical realm. The University of Virginia study led to connections with other researchers, other institutions studying consciousness and its relationship to the physical brain. I participated in several studies, always with the same intention, to help bridge the gap between subjective experience and objective understanding, between spiritual insight and scientific inquiry. 2 years after my near-death experience, I published a book. Not the sensationalized account that some publishers had proposed, but a thoughtful exploration of my experience and what it had taught me about life, death, consciousness, and purpose. Sarah helped me write it, her clear thinking and gentle skepticism providing a perfect counterbalance to my certainty. The book found its audience, not massive bestseller status, but a steady growing readership of people seeking answers to the deepest questions of existence. It was translated into several languages, opening doors to speak in places I never imagined visiting. Through it all, I remained grounded in what mattered most: my family, my daily life, the simple joys of watching my son grow, of loving my wife, of being present in each moment. The message I'd brought back applied as much to my own life as to those I shared it with. One evening, about 3 years after my NDE, I took Ethan fishing at the pond near our house. He was 6 now, patient enough to sit quietly with a line in the water, waiting for the telltale tug. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ethan looked up at me with his mother's eyes. "Dad, is heaven real?" The question didn't surprise me. He'd heard me talk about my experience often enough, though we'd never discussed it directly. "I believe it is," I said, "but it might not be exactly what people think." He nodded, considering this. "Is it like the place you went when you got hurt?" "Yes, I think so, but even more beautiful, more real." He was quiet for a moment, watching a dragonfly skim across the water's surface. "Are you scared to die again?" The question pierced me with its innocence, its directness. I put my arm around his small shoulders. "No, buddy, I'm not scared to die, but I'm in no hurry either." I hugged him closer. "I've got too much to live for right here." He smiled, satisfied with this answer, and returned his attention to his fishing line. As I sat there with my son, watching the day fade into dusk, I felt a profound sense of rightness, of purpose fulfilled and still fulfilling. The message I'd brought back from beyond death wasn't just for others, it was for me too. A reminder to live fully in each moment, to recognize the sacred in the ordinary, to see beyond the illusion of separateness to the love that connects us all. The beings had told me that those who were ready would hear. In the years since my experience, I'd seen the truth of that statement again and again. Some dismissed my story outright, unable or unwilling to consider possibilities beyond their current understanding. Others embraced it too eagerly, elevating me to a status I neither wanted nor deserved. But so many recognized in my words a truth they'd always known somehow, somewhere deep within themselves. A remembering rather than a learning. A coming home to what they'd never really forgotten. That, I came to understand, was the true purpose of my journey and return. Not to bring something new, but to remind people of what they already knew. To be a mirror reflecting back their own divine nature, their own eternal consciousness, their own unbreakable connection to the source of all being. Sometimes in quiet moments like this one with Ethan, I would feel the presence of those beings of light. Not as vividly as during my NDE, but as a gentle awareness, a subtle reminder that the veil between worlds is thinner than we imagine, that we are never truly alone. That love surrounds us always, even when, especially when, we cannot see or feel it. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Ethan's line suddenly went taut. His face lit up with excitement. "Dad, I think I got one." I helped him reel it in, a small bass wriggling and fighting against the hook. After admiring his catch, I showed him how to gently remove the hook and release the fish back into the pond. "Why are we letting it go?" he asked, watching the fish disappear into the dark water. "Because it has more living to do," I said. "Just like us." He nodded, wisdom beyond his years in his young face. Then he cast his line out again, ready for whatever might come next. And so was I. The message I'd brought back from death wasn't complicated, though its implications were profound. We are more than our physical bodies. Consciousness continues. Love is the fundamental reality underlying all existence. And our purpose here, in these temporary, limited forms, is to remember who we truly are, to help others remember, and to embody that remembering in how we live. That night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, as I kissed my wife and thanked whatever forces had allowed me to return to this life, this love, this purpose, I felt a completeness I'd never known before my heart stopped in that helicopter over Iraq. I had died. I had seen beyond the veil of physical existence. And I had come back with a message that would guide the rest of my life. Remember who you are. Remember that love is all there is. Remember that death is not the end, but a transition. Remember and live accordingly. And in that remembering, find the peace that transcends understanding, the connection that defies separation, and the love that conquers fear. Even now, years later, I sometimes wake in the night with echoes of that otherworldly realm still resonating in my consciousness. In those moments, the barriers between worlds seem especially thin, and I can almost hear the beings who guided me, who showed me the truth beyond appearances. Remember, they seem to whisper. Remember and tell others. And I do. Day by day, person by person, heart by heart. I remember, and I tell, and in the telling something awakens. In me, in those who listen, in the space between us where truth resides. Something remembers, something returns, something heals. In the end, that's what my near-death experience in Iraq gave me. Not just a second chance at life, but a glimpse of what life truly is. Not limited to these bodies, these identities, these brief spans of years, but eternal, connected, whole. That is the message I carry. That is the truth I live. And it has made all the difference.